This was once a man's shirt that he wore to the office. Ew. And now it's a piece of girly pop history. Hello. Hello. What's going on? Okay, hey guys. Hello. Hello everybody. I'm very, very, very excited for today's video because I'm obsessed with making corsets. Like, obsessed. Today it's my favorite thing to make. Slight history of how we got to this video here. I saw this photo of Sabrina Carpenter and I was like obsessed with her outfit. So I looked at my corset and then she looked at me and then I looked at her and I was like, okay, let's make it Sabrina Carpenter. Let me show you. This is me, my espresso. It came out so cute, I'm not gonna lie. It's too big for me. I'm upset about that. But anyway, I also didn't love that corset pattern. Since then, I have tried a new pattern because I made like a brat inspired corset. I'm like, guys, I don't even wear these. I'm just obsessed with making them. If anyone want to buy this, I will sell it to you for $25. So I've since found a better corset pattern that I like, and I was kind of like, does anybody want to see a start to finish of the Sabrina Carpenter corset dupe? And I got one yes, and that's all I needed. To recap, what we're doing today is we are taking a men's button-up that I thrifted, and we are going to make the Sabrina Carpenter corset. So first, let's talk about the original piece. The original piece is by Frovlov or Frovlov. I'm so sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. It is a Ukrainian designer. Guys, it's Frolov. I'm like watching this. Oh my god, I'm literally dying. And I was like also just crying. So I'm literally dying. Okay, but Frolov. It is gorgeous, stunning. If you're not gonna make this yourself, actually, I'm not sure that I saw it on the website, but she has so many other stunning pieces. One day, mark my words, when I'm wealthy, I will purchase from all the designers that I dupe, but for now we're duping. Let's talk about the materials that we need. I'm trying so hard to wear my hair down. It's just, how do people do it? Like, okay, relaxing. Materials. So the first thing you're gonna do is thrift for the men's button-up. So I wear a size 6. The corset I made originally, I would say, is a size 8, and I got 2 men's button-ups that were like a men's medium, I believe, in yellow, okay? This one that I'm making today is for my little sister, who's super petite. She's like a size 2. So I got 1 triple XL, and I'm hoping, I really am confident that this is gonna be enough fabric for the shell and the lining, but just in case, I'm perfectly okay using a different lining that I already have in my scrap bin. So just FYI, we will see. I can't tell you right now. Maybe I should. Anyway, sorry. Continue then to see if this was enough fabric, but I got, this is a men's LL Bean, 17.5 to 35. I have no idea what that means. It's 100% cotton and it's a wrinkle free, and I love all of those things, and my little sister specifically said pink, so that's why we got this one. But watch me cut it open first and see how much material you get, like if you've never cut one open before, and then maybe gauge how many you should pick up at the store. So I'm gonna show you the best way to cut the shirt open so that you get like the most material out of it. Okay, so all of that being said, we're thrifting men's dress shirts. The next thing you're gonna need is boning, and I have 2 different types of boning here. I'll show you, it's very easy to use either kind. I'm actually going to, I'm trying to complete this roll. So I'm using a cased hard plastic boning, but I take the casing off. You'll see that later. However, if you already have this kind of like you sew it on top boning, that's fine too. I'll tell you how to use both. It's not that crazy. Okay, you're gonna want grommets. I don't know if that's the right word. You're gonna want to pick up eyelets. These ones are just from the Hobby Lobby. I don't recommend shopping there. Don't shop there, but it's the only thing I have by me. Anyway, so I have these eyelets, and more is always best. So depending on the size and like the size of your bodice is going to depend on how many you need, but I usually I try to get a set of 24. 6 and 6 is 12, 8 and 8 is 16, and I like the small ones, so around there. The first corset I did, I used really big eyelets, and I only used like 4, I think. So it depends on what look you want, but you're gonna want to pick up some eyelet. And then different ones come with either you can use like a hammer you already have at home, or like I have a puncher, you know, but that's just because I make corsets all the time now. And fusible interfacing. This is super important, especially because we're using a t-shirt material. So I get a medium stabilization iron-on interfacing. This is the one that I pick up, and that's what I have. Hello, new day, new me. Today we're going to complete all of the prep. I'm pretty excited about it. I'm ready to get into it. Here we go. I apologize in advance for any extra noise like mowing or anything. It's been a weird time around here. And lastly, before I get into it, I apologize for the lighting because I'm working against, I normally wouldn't angle it this way, but obviously we're working with the desk. I'm filming simultaneously. We're trying something new. The first thing that we're gonna do is actually edit the pattern. So here you can see, oh, okay, this is so fun. Okay, here you can see all of the pieces. There's 4 pieces to this pattern, and for each fabric, you're gonna cut 7 because these are doubled and this is cut on a fold. That is if you use the same pattern as me, which I, not sponsored or anything, I just really like this one. And there's 2 adjustments that I need to make before I go cutting the fabric. The first thing that I did is I printed out a heart and I folded it in half because this again is cut on a fold, and I pinned it where I want it. This isn't in my size, this is gonna be for my little sister, but you can see here on the pattern that there is a line for your seam allowance. There's a line for your seam allowance. I literally can't talk right now, okay. So I kind of am pretending that I'm her, and I'm placing the top where I think that the corset would sit on her, and I'm putting the heart, like, I know she has a little bit of a smaller chest than me. This is a size smaller than mine. So I'm just kind of trying to picture the best place for the heart and comparing it to the original, which, okay, so I'm using my inspiration to plan this out. Okay, so I went ahead and I cut out the heart, and then this pattern comes in 3 lengths, cropped, mid-length, and long, and my sister wants it mid-length, so I'm gonna go through and cut them all to mid-length. So all of the pieces are prepped for the pattern, and we can go ahead and dissect our thrifted shirt. I have an iron ready to go, and I have my seam ripper, by the way. I literally feel like we're dissecting something in like science class, like I'm giving like a science lecture. So we're gonna go ahead, and the goal of taking this men's button up apart is to make sure that we keep as many big pieces together. So the first thing that I'm gonna do is take off this front panel here. This is where those buttons are. So I'm gonna seam rip all the way up the side, up the armpit, and then it goes across the shoulder as well. I'm gonna go ahead and take that panel out on both sides. I did that entire bit and the microphone wasn't working, but I've already cut everything, so we're just gonna move forward. I did both panels and I already took the pocket off. The stitching on this, on the pocket, is still pretty intense, so I'm gonna use this for the lining because it'll be on the inside, so even if you can see the stitching holes, like, I don't really care. So this is just the 2 front panels. All right, so now I'm gonna take the sleeve apart. So I took the sleeve off of the arm, and then there's just one other seam to open it up. So now my triple XL shirt is cut into, this is a sleeve, right? Looking large. Another sleeve, the 2 front panels, and then the 1 large back panel. And I did iron them. Some of these pleats, oh my gosh, or like the darts, whatever, the industrial iron, my baby iron, cannot get these out, so I'm just gonna keep moving. The piece that I'm starting with is going to be the middle piece because it needs to be done on a fold. So I need the biggest pieces of fabric to be able to fold them. Because I'm doing a size 4 though, these panels, I'm feeling really confident I'm gonna have enough. I can literally use the best front panel that has no stitch marks or anything. I'm gonna use that for my front. So I'm gonna go ahead and fold it over. And I'm also gonna cut out the heart here. And then I'm just literally cutting out the rest of the pieces. This is gonna take me a while. I'm gonna cut out 2 of every pattern, okay, according to the directions, 1 for the outer shell and 1 for the lining. And then I'm cutting out the pattern for a 3rd time onto this fusible interfacing. So I'm gonna have 3 of each pattern piece, 1 of which being on the interfacing. Hello, another new day. I literally can't get anything done. I don't know, but today I am going to get a lot done, I swear. So I have every single piece cut out, and then I've also already connected the interfacing with the front panels, and I just have a couple notes that I want to share about that. So when you put your interfacing on, be patient, let it heat completely through, and then also give it time to cool before checking and to see by trying to peel it apart. If you're doing it with the thrifted button up the way I'm doing it, by now I'm already not following the instructions on the pattern, just FYI. The piece that the interfacing is going on is going to be the outside shell. So this is the piece that will be public facing. So if you have a piece like I do that has a crease in it that was like professionally creased and it's not going to come out, I would recommend keeping that for the inside lining because nobody's going to see it, and using your best cut and best looking panels to put the interfacing on, because again, that's going to be your outside panel. So now we're finally going to start sewing. So with this pattern, I'm going to do the princess seams, and this is how I do it. It always works out for me. But you want to check the width of your boning. So if you're doing channeled boning, you need to make sure your second seam is going to be wide enough to fold over and make the channel. If you're doing sew on top boning, it doesn't really matter, and you'll see what I mean. So with princess seams, I'm actually going to go ahead and sew it so that when it's done, the seams face out on the right side of the fabric. So it's kind of that way that you always want to sew it. It's not reverse. I'm sewing it so that when I'm done, the right sides all face out and I'm looking at all of the seams. I do want to note, when you're doing the first princess seam, you want it to be smaller because we're about to trim anyway. So you obviously want to pick up both sides, okay, that you're sewing down. But I'm actually aiming just slightly inside of the end of the presser foot when I'm sewing my line. So I'm going to go ahead and put together my entire outer shell with the first seam before I princess it, and my entire lining. And I just want to point out that when we're putting these together, you're just going to want to go super slow and steady, like a few centimeters at a time, while you go around that curve, because it does create like a 3D effect. So it's going to be a very slow connection when you're doing the curve here. And then after I do both the outer shell and the lining, I'll come and show you what's going on and how we prep for the final seam before we put the boning in. The first step of the princess seams is done on my outer shell. You could tell this is the outer because I have my, okay, the inside's different. Here it is. Now what I'm gonna do is trim my threads, and I'm also taking my fabric scissors and I'm cutting the seams as close, scary to say. I'm cutting them really close to where I sewed, but not too close that it might fray and tear the seam apart. So as you can see, the entire corset shell is sewn together with the seams facing out on the nice side. This is the side that will be showing. This is the side with interfacing. And I went and I trimmed all my strings and I trimmed the seams pretty short. You could see there. So now I need to fold them over and prep for the final seam. So I like to go from the middle and have all of the seams pressed outwards. So these ones are all going to get pressed this way. These ones are all going to get pressed this way. So I'm going to take my iron. So I'm going to press all of these and then I'll show you the second press. There's another press. I'm just talking to myself. I'm not even recording. All right, so we just pressed the seams and they're going in different directions from the middle. Okay, now we're doing the second part of the princess seam, which is what you normally do, putting the right sides together and sewing. But I do have some tips. So you want to make sure that you maintain the direction that we're going. So I'm folding the whole thing over. You know what? Come here, come here. So I'm folding it over in that direction that I wanted, where you trimmed, and this is why you want to trim it thin, but not too thin. I'm gonna press, and then we're gonna pin it about a 1/2 inch in. This is the most important part, so I really want this to be clear. I'm gonna tell you what we're doing for the next 2 steps because it's important for doing this step. So we're gonna sew this channel, and then we're gonna fold it and sew it flat, but we're gonna get as close as possible there, so we don't need a big seam allowance. But you need to keep that in mind because we wanna go in about a 1/2 inch. This is a little far, I probably won't go out that far. I'll probably line it up right about there. It even helps to take your boning and make sure that when you flip this and sew it again, that your boning's gonna be able to fit inside, but you don't want too much room. So you don't want it to be able to wiggle around, but you do want to be able to fold this over and sew it again. So that's why I do about a 1/2 inch. So I'm gonna go. All right, so the last thing we're gonna do is fold over, which I've already done, the channels that we made, and we're gonna sew them one more time. And this really looks best if you, again, fold them all pointing out. So these ones, I have them and I'm going to sew down on the right-hand side. These ones I'm sewing down on the left-hand side. It is me from the future with some tips about these princess seams because I made a mistake and I do not want you to make the same mistake. So you can see here, this is my outer panel and I have finished these ones. And I sewed them flat inside, like everything we've been talking about, going great. Okay, and then here on the boobs is where the disaster started happening. So we're folding down the princess seam, sewing it flat, and that's creating the channel, right? That's what we're working on. This is super important because it is not fun to have to seam rip on this with the interfacing and everything, okay? Trust me. When you're doing the middle panel, the curves of the breast cups, you need to make sure that you're folding it in. It will never lie flat correctly if you fold it outwards to try to create the channels. And if you just, okay. What we want to do here is make sure we're folding these in. I have folded them out last night. I was literally delusional yesterday. I don't know what I was doing. So I was folding them out because I wanted all of these folded out just because I like the way it spaces out that way better. Okay, so naturally I folded this out to match, but it's not going to line up. And now I've pretty badly damaged, sorry to my sister, I've pretty badly damaged the fabric trying to take the stitching out. So I just wanted to warn you guys in advance. When you're finishing your princess seams and you're taking the channel, it has to fold in order to lie flat. So I just wanted to warn you guys before you made the mistake that I made. I'm going to use a zipper foot so I can get as close to the edge as possible, okay, so that we can stick the boning in. So all of the seams are sewn flat. This is the inside, obviously. Sorry, it's so messy. Here you could see it's like destroyed because I sewed these seams flat going out first, and that's what I'm warning you about. It won't lay right. You have to fold it in. These ones at the boob only. These ones I like to fold out because I just like with the way the proportions look better. But these middle ones have to fold in, so just letting you know. Okay, so I have the outer shell and the inner lining done. And again, I'm doing the same exact thing to both of these. One of them I just, I half-assed and I messed up. And this one I also messed up, but that's okay. They both came out okay. And I have my princess seams sewn flat for my boning. There's probably two types of boning that you're looking at online. They're both going to be handled differently. I will say if you're using the sew on top type boning and you actually want to sew on top, maybe I would skip sewing the flannels flat first and just sew the boning on top. But let's get to that. We'll move over here. This is my outer corset shell. All right. And we're looking at two types of boning. There's the kind that comes with casing like this. This is the kind that I'm going to use, except I'm actually going to take it out of the casing. All that I would do with this is make sure that it's going to fit in these channels, which I know it will because we talked about that earlier. Let's say that it doesn't fit in the channels, or you have a boning like this that you sew directly on. You can also see this one's a little bit wider, so it's going to give a slightly different look. If I got to the point right before sewing these flat and I realized that it wasn't going to be wide enough for this boning, or I had bought this kind, instead of sewing down the princess seams like I just did to create these channels, I would instead sew this along with the line I've already made and sew this side down, catching both the channel underneath that we're not using and the boning. So this kind of boning you sew right on top of, and that is what I would do. If I bought this kind and my homemade channels didn't work, you do the same thing that you would do with the other boning, but with the channel that it comes with. So I would line this up, sew it right over top of the stitch that I already made for the seam, and then get my shorter channel that didn't fit underneath, sew on top here, trapping it inside, and then my boning can go right through there. And for the third option, you could sew flat the channel you did make and then add a channel on each side, giving it much, much more structure. If I'm remembering correctly as well, I think the pattern originally calls for boning on both sides. It's just, I don't know, I actually have never tried it with the extra boning. Maybe I will sometime, but I only do one piece of boning through the channel that I made, and I like the way that it looks. If you're doing the sew in boning or even sewing in the channels that your boning came with, you need to do that now. If you're following me exactly and you're putting the boning through the channels that you made, like I'm doing, we're gonna put the lining in now first, okay? But the part that we're on right now is called lining. We're adding the lining. The goal with the lining is to have the nice side facing out here, and obviously we want our nice side facing out on the shell side. So we want it to look like this in the end. So what we're gonna do is put the nice sides together. With this project specifically, because of the heart cutout, I'm actually gonna pin at the cutout to make sure that when I'm lining everything up, everything lines up with the heart, because that is my priority. But I'm not sewing it down yet. We want to flip it over first. I need the hearts where they're cut out to match up. Like, that's the most important thing. So I pinned down the hearts, sewed the two together, sandwiched right across the top with that 1/2-inch seam allowance. And then I went ahead and lined up the sides as well, and I did a slightly smaller seam allowance on the sides, connecting the sides. Then you can take the pins off of the heart and flip the whole thing inside out. I will say, if you cut the corners, be careful not to actually cut too far in, but if you cut the corners a little, you'll get a nicer point in those. And I went ahead and I shoved and I got those corner points with my Apple Pencil. So now we're all flipped right side out. This is what's gonna be, okay, I'm actually getting excited. I get excited about a project and then I start doing it and then I'm like, oh my God, this is literally the worst thing ever. And then I start getting really, really excited towards the end again when it actually looks good. Okay, so this is what we're looking at. And before, technically the next step is a hot press and a top stitch. But the most important thing in the world to me is that this heart stays together. So I pin down the heart again, and this time I'm gonna go ahead and sew around it, connecting it. If you have a standard sewing machine, I couldn't recommend, and not an overlocker, I couldn't recommend enough getting an overlock foot. My sewing machine, it's the Singer Heavy Duty. It has an overlock stitch, and a lot of them do. And so this will function the way that a serger or overlocker would. This recreates that effect. However, if you don't have anything but the absolute basics, I would recommend using a zigzag stitch to do this. But you know what? At the absolute worst, just do a stitch around maybe 2 times and connect the heart with the outshell and the lining and connect them both. I'm gonna make sure the lining pushes slightly behind. I'm gonna give it a good press with the iron, and then I'm just gonna take my, my standard foot, sew a top stitch down to make sure the lining doesn't pop over. So to recap, I'm overlocking the heart, I'm ironing the lining down flat at the top stitching, adding one more channel, and then we'll meet up, and it'll probably be tomorrow, the last day, guys, my last outfit, I swear. This has taken me so many days, but honestly, sometimes I just need to take breaks, or I start getting so mad and I start doing stupid things like folding the cups in the wrong way, and then I get mad about that and I'm like, forget the whole thing. So if you're interested in that kind of really uncomfortable energy, again, subscribe. All right, but I'll see you tomorrow for literally the last final things. Okay. Hello. Okay, as you can see, I finished the top. So let's sit down and talk about these last few steps. So I finished the top this morning, and these last few steps are the most fun ones in my opinion. So yeah, we'll just go over them. And if you're doing inserted boning into the channeling like I did, before we hem the bottom, which is next, we want to insert our boning. I just want to remind you, this is a size 2 small on me because I made it for my sister. This is a 4. I wear a 6, and it is barely holding. I didn't have a longer ribbon, so it's like an amalgamation of a lot of things, but I can't breathe. So you're gonna measure your boning through the channel and then cut at the ends. And then I folded my hem at the bottom about a 1/2 inch, a little bit less. So depending how far up you're gonna fold your hem, you're then gonna cut that much off of your boning, because we're gonna tuck our fabric and sew it across the top. So the boning has to be a little bit shorter than how long the channel is right now. And I always recommend finishing your boning, so I often use a nail file to round the edges. You can use some good scissors to cut a nice curve, or you can even melt it with plastic, which probably isn't very good for you. This is just to make sure that if there's any pressure, it's not gonna poke through or stab you or pierce the fabric like the sharp plastic corners of a flat cut. So you want to make sure it gets rounded, and then go ahead and do that for all of the channels. And then depending on how malleable your boning is, you want to try to flatten it out. I was able to do that by just folding it in the opposite direction of the curve, because most boning comes wrapped in a coil, but you can also use your iron on like a low heat and just like iron it out. I do that a lot too. So after you have boning in all of the channels, we're gonna hem the bottom of the corset together. So the way I like to hem is I fold in at the corners and then I go to the middle and I line it up like that so that the corner literally folds and presses and everything's closed in. And I try my best to have the front fabric slightly overhang the back lining. And then I pin it and give it a press with the iron before I top stitch across the whole bottom. And that's gonna lock in the boning and connect the lining with the outer shell. After I've gone and I've hemmed the bottom, I'm gonna prepare the back channel for the corset ribbon holes. So I did get a little fancy with this. I created a whole like paper pattern to make sure that where I was starting my holes was the exact same place, because I've tried to eyeball it before and even this time it didn't come out perfect. But I would recommend trying to make sure that you're lining them up as evenly spaced as you can. I did put a double lined stitch just straight down because I feel like it gives it a little more reinforcement where those holes are going to be. And then my preferred practice for making these holes is actually to use a buttonhole stitch, because I've tried to rip the fabric and punch the eyelets in and it's like ripped the fabric more, and I find that using a buttonholer really prevents like extra ripping of your fabric. So I literally put the eyelet in the buttonholer on my machine, and then I create buttonholes for each of the like where I'm gonna put the eyelets, and I seam rip that open just like I would with a button. And then my favorite part, I have a fancy eyelet punch, but if you don't have one of these, they usually come with like a hammer tool. This is pretty easy. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know. I put the rounded side out because I assume you would want the flat and uglier side on you. Although I kind of wish they were flat on both sides. But they came out beautiful and I used gold. And then finally the decor. This part is totally up to you guys. Hers has a lot more bedazzling. I needed to get this video out if I'm being transparent. There was no time for extra bedazzling. I also have been so into beading lately, so I went ahead and I created my beaded heart via tambour embroidery. It's like my current obsession, so any opportunity I have to work it in, I'm doing it. You could literally use just like thread and beads, but I did this separate and then I sewed it on. And yeah, I do really like how it came out, but you don't have to do it in such a complex way. Like, this is the fun part. You can decorate around your heart however you want. Beads, jewels, gems, you know, all the whimsy, whatever you like. I think that is the whole corset, guys. So, can you believe we made this? Oh, man, that would have been good if I didn't stutter. Can you believe we thrifted this and now it's this? This was once a man's shirt that he wore to the office. Ew. And now it's a piece of girly pop history. If you guys are going to the Sabrina show, be safe, have fun. Okay, guys, this was a lot of fun. Subscribe if you like it. Also, give it a thumbs up if you like it, please. Okay. All right, let's do some final looks and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.